You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hey everybody, this is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and we got Patricia Lynn on this episode. Patricia is a New York City-based theater maker. She fancies herself to be a gothic feminist. She aims to reclaim the traditionalist genre by writing contemporary gothic plays that ask provocative questions about women and society today. She also adapts iconic gothic novels for the stage. All right, I purchased my ticket. I'm in, Patricia.
Great. We'd love to have you.
Tell us, that's provocative to me. I love the Gothic. I love Gothic literature. You take a classic Gothic work, and you're thinking about the stage, and you'd be like, we get a center women in this. What's going on with your process? Like, what's coming out that's new when you go into this creative process?
Yeah, I just a little about me. I was always obsessed with Gothic literature as a kid, and then as an adult, you reread things you loved as a kid, and you see it through a different lens, kind of with age and maturity. And one thing I observed about a lot of that work is the traditional stereotypes of women or the misogyny or all the kind of things that happened in like 19th century Gothic literature specifically. Yeah. So Dracula, Jekyll and Hyde, all those classic works. Even Mary Shelley with Frankenstein, the men really take the center stage in that story, while Elizabeth has more of a secondary role. And I think Gothic is so suited for the stage in terms of how heightened it is, how dramatic it is. It's probably why I loved it as a kid so much, because I've been making theater since 4th, 5th grade. So kind of that's probably why that style of literature always spoke to me so much. So as I became more of a writer, I started as an actor. I kind of do everything really. I've directed, I've stage managed, I'm the costume designer and the scenic designer for The Truth About Transylvania, and I'm in it. So I think I love kind of just finding ways to honor the original story that I grew up loving so much, but also finding what's a way to put my stamp on it, whether it is centering women front and center, or in Truth About Transylvania, what we're doing is actually asking a lot of questions about what is the conception of masculinity, and how does these concepts of quote unquote, what is a real man, drive men to act a certain way. Because in some ways, you can't have a conversation about what's happening with misogyny and patriarchal culture without looking, what is the impact on the male psyche as well. So, so this story kind of centers men more than most of my work, but then you do have the character I'm playing who is struggling with, I don't want anyone to see me as a damsel in distress, because I'm stuck in Transylvania, and apparently bitten by a vampire. So I know how everyone's going to see me.
Yeah. I don't broad sweep here, but classic Gothic, it's almost, tell me if you agree, the women can be part of the expected set piece, right? It's a question of agency within it. I found in general, my thinking, the overall concept of doom that sometimes you're introduced to early on, affects the agency and affects female agency, because it's there's something about the Gothic. I'm thinking of Fall of the House of Usher. You're given these details, cracks, the relationship. You're like, this is fucking doom. Then within that setting, what agency do you have? Did you let me twist it a little bit. Like with some of the works you've gone back towards, have you been surprised, or like what you could develop and what you saw in female agency in, say, a classic Gothic piece of literature?
Yeah, I mean, because it's interesting because I think what you're speaking to is, what is the question of agency for these women, especially when most of the times trauma that happens to them in these stories end up driving the man to action. Because, oh no, my partner has been injured or bitten by a vampire, or, the Frankenstein's monster kills, spoiler alert, kills.
It's all right.
Sorry if you haven't seen the new movie.
There's a movie coming out too. Yes.
Yeah, there's a movie coming out. It's gonna be great. That it drives the man to action. It doesn't drive the woman to stand up for herself, and kind of overcome, this is what happened to me. So I think the female characters can become their trauma instead of who is the person outside of their trauma.
I got it. Yeah.
So that's what I like to dive into in terms of, like, I don't necessarily want to shy away from the doom, from the drama, from like all those things we love in Gothic literature. But how do you twist it so the woman ends up standing on her feet more, and standing up for herself more? And that's always what's surprising, because I don't always know when I start. I just know, like, this is the person who's speaking to me. Yeah. And I'm a very image driven writer. So it's usually some weird dream I've had, or I'm like about to fall asleep, and then I get this image. There's this whole thing in Truth About Transylvania about the truth chair, which is if you sit in the chair, you have to tell the truth.
Oh.
And everyone's like, how did you think of that? And I'm like, I don't know. But it's this image in my head of, like, so John, who's our central character in this, if he sits in this chair, he has to tell the truth. And because that's what his father taught him. And that's what his father said. This is what a man does. And so he's trying to retell his story, because ultimately John is trying to convince everyone what happened, that Dracula is real and what happened in Transylvania is true. And so that's his kind of overall journey throughout so it's a memory play. And I didn't always see it as a memory play either, which is interesting. So you start out with, how do you want to adapt these works? And then the work sometimes surprises you, or the character surprises you, or this truth chair image pops in your head. And then I'm up at 5 a.m. rewriting a monologue that all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is how this play starts.
I love that. No, I mean, thanks for taking us in too, because what I like about talking about that way is, like, the text having these residual properties that you don't know in reworking or thinking about again where those pieces are going to be, where you develop. Dream, truth chair. Goodness gracious! Maybe I'll put one here somewhere when I need some truth from someone.
Right. Yeah.
might catch on as an idea. Tell us about you mentioned you've been doing art stuff for a while and talking about you. Was there a moment in your life where you said, I'm an artist, like, this is what I do, like, you leaned into it? What was that journey like?
I think for me, I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, I started doing theater fifth grade. Fifth grade, I know that's when I was in my first show called The Planet of the Perfectly Awful People, by the way, a classic bit of literature.
It sounds good to me. I'm a sucker.
I got a pie thrown in my face. I mean, how can you not want to do theater for the rest of your life after getting that big of a laugh?
As long as it's not hot.
Yeah, exactly. So I've always kind of been drawn to telling a story, whether that it is I'm the actor on the stage, or I also remember writing. I think I wrote my first play in fourth grade for an extra credit. You could write an epilogue for the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler, which was a book we had read.
I love that book.
And I still remember, it's such a good book, right?
Nobody wants to read it. When I recommend it to other people, they look at me with a side eye. I'm like, bullshit, read that book.
Oh, it's wonderful.
I know. I'm in the wrong crowd sometimes.
Yeah. I'll start recommending it and see what happens. And see if I get the same response. And I just always remembered it's telling stories, and there's something to me about telling a story live. So sometimes people are like, you want to adapt this to a screenplay or make this a short film? And I'm usually like, no, because there is something about the immediacy of telling a story. And you've got one shot on this night to tell this story to this specific group of people.
That's the piece that blows me away. Like, and I love that I've been able to talk to in my show, like for creators, theater, Broadway, off Broadway, and I'm able to tap into like a creative piece that's just like really fascinates me. Like the energy around it, like live performance, and I talk, about say comedy and theater, and when it's like, as opposed to other art experiences, it was like, you can talk about in a way that second night I fucking killed it, or like, or being like, boom, like, so the promise of a live performance that has all these particularities to it, I don't think people sit down on the bench and think about that a little bit. I love the surprise that the format guarantees.
Well, I still remember having a conversation with my family when I was doing theater, and I remember talking to my dad, because my dad went to every single one of my brother's football games, and he only saw my plays once. And I was like, why do you see all of his sports games, but you only see my play once? And he's like, well, it's the same. And I'm like, go see it again. And now he sees my shows multiple times.
Yeah, Dad. You explained it.
Good dad. Because he was like, oh, the football games are different. And I was like, the football games look exactly the same to me. So it's all about perspective. Because there is something to the immediacy of, and the nuance that can come out. Even just doing the difference from a first show and a last show, that the bond you can have with your actors deepens. And then just the story becomes more textured and rich the more you tell it in front of an audience. Because the audience is the essential component of theater. Like, that's what makes it theater. So learning what they respond to, whether it's a laugh or whether it's a gasp, or my favorite is actually just that silence where you could just hear a pin drop because the entire room is just really listening to everything that's happening on that stage. Like, that's gold. That's magic. And because everyone's just that collective, I'm enraptured with this story and what's happening on this stage right now. And you can't beat that. I mean, in my opinion, like, that's like the dream. That's why I stay up late and, paint things till 2 a.m. and, do all you have to do to make that live experience for an audience.
Yeah, I love that. What is art? What is art?
I mean, the first word that came to my head is passion. Art is passion. Art, and passion is such a great broad word. And I think art is the same. So, like, we can have a similar passion for a story, but that passion can derive from a different place, whether it's energy-wise, whether it's idea-wise, that can compel you to tell this story. Like, the cast we have is fantastic. And you can tell all of us are passionate about different sides of the same story. So I think art is passion to me, and the most exciting art to me, to take it a step further, is when all those passions come together and you collaborate to make it one big piece, whether it is a story or whether it is a visual.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've asked this question a million billion times, much to the chagrin of some folks around me, but yeah, I don't. When I heard passion, it popped into my head like the word, not that people have an answer like about passion, but like passion as a concept really stuck out to me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what's the role of art now? Has that is the role of art changed? We're recording here a little bit later, 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Is whether it's plays or any piece of art, is the role of art different now, or is art just kind of arting like it has to and it should have?
Well, I think I wonder if it's a little of both, because I think the function of art within the society should always be malleable, just like passion is always malleable. Passion changes, passion deepens, passion fades. Um, that's one of the exciting things about it. And I think, especially in a more tumultuous time, art moves, art changes, but art sustains. Just like I think passion always sustains, whether it can darken or it can brighten. But like once you have a passion for something, I think that never fades. So I think, in my opinion, art will never fade, but art will always change.
I love it. Can you geek out on the truth about Transylvania, telling us about the production and people who involved and a bit of the story without compromise?
Yeah. I'm always happy to geek out about
Yeah,
something I wrote. So
I
thank you
know.
for this opportunity.
I just asked out of courtesy.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is inspired by Dracula, just going for basics. And kind of the story has become centered on John Harker, who, in my opinion, in the book is a wonderful, wonderful character. But in a lot of adaptations, he doesn't really get the spotlight I think he deserves. And there's a lot in the book about all the other male characters, like, because the book is diary entries, phonograph recording, so you get in everyone's point of view, which is nice. And all the men keep thinking about him, oh, he's not, I was expecting someone more manly,
Okay.
like, because he survived being with a vampire, and this little guy came in, and that always just irked me, because
Yeah.
I was like, this is a wonderful, flawed, intelligent man. Why are we constantly judging him? And in thinking about what's happening in the world today with gender identity and role, I think a lot of this comes back to, we have this conception of what is a man.
Yeah.
And if you don't fit that mold, you are judged. And I think that spills out to how we see women, how we see trans, how we see, cisgender or trans, how we see all these other identities that exist in our world. I think come back to, there is a concept of what is a man. And if you are not that, you are a failure. And so it's been interesting juxtaposing that with traditional Dracula. So a man goes to a castle. It is set in modern day. So it is 2025. And so John takes his wife to Transylvania for their kind of a second honeymoon. Because why not? Go to Transylvania. Do something different.
Saw the flyer. Beautiful nights.
Beautiful nights. The mountains. There's a lot of forest. It's actually, if you look up images of Transylvania, I was shocked. I was like, it's beautiful here.
That's why people go.
Let's go. So he goes to Transylvania with his partner, and they've been having a rough time, so they're looking to reconnect. And of course, vampire madness ensues. And so he's trying to convince the world. So there's a lot of direct address monologue, because he is basically doing a live stream trying to convince people, guys, Dracula is real.
Yeah.
Here's how I know. And so then we kind of jump back and forth in time to kind of, as he tells his story. And we're kind of playing with a different conception of Dracula, not to give too much away, but it's not going to be Bela Lugosi up there, or Gary Oldman or Frank Langella, or those kind of archetypes that we've come to know with the Dracula myth. Like, we're playing with something more visceral, more primal, going back to that conception of what is man. In like kind of that caveman dark sense.
Yeah, I think it's such an important question that you posed at the beginning, particularly because it comports with my understanding, like the definition of a man in that or male, and like things flowing from that, right? Like characteristics and attributes that a man might exhibit that look male, and then like a counter bit basic maybe relationships with women where it's like deep care, deep sensitivity, and it's like there's something about, regardless on the gender question, it's always we're caught in this like duality, and the categorization doesn't I think it creates us so much difficulty in life of ascribing, attributes, characteristics, failings by mere presentation.
Yeah,
Shortchanges everybody.
Yeah, and you're right. It's all identities that wrestle with, like, sometimes we're expected to be a concept, not a person.
Yeah.
And because people are unique, people are specific, people are nuanced, versus this concept of whether it is man, woman, non-binary, whatever your identity may be. There's a pressure to meet that standard, and if you don't, you're a failure as a person. When really the joy of being a person is being human, which means you will make mistakes. Which is great to have in a monster story, because you have a monster, and I do think the best monster stories are the ones where you do focus on the humans. And it's because we always are fascinated by the idea of what a human being is going to do when faced with a monster. Because that's when you see who that person really is.
I think about it all the time.
Yeah.
Monsters.
Yep.
Monsters is, I find that just talking about Dracula, vampires and such, for me, like, it's always been such a fertile area, like, even when I've observed casually, I mean, it's blood, and there's eroticism and homoeroticism and just intense, like palpable atmospheres. Things seem threatened. Senses are pitched and I think there's such, and particularly in the work that you do, and I'm not talking about the work like that you do in rewriting, recreating. I'm just saying, like, in general, that area has so much fertility, and for areas that humans have shown keen interest over time: darkness, sex, living forever, cursed, haunted. And I'm like, I get excited about it because, like, all these big life things are in that mythology. And just the presence of blood and sucking blood and like that contact is like, well, there's a ton in there. And I wish I would hopefully see the truth about Transylvania, like how that manifests. Question you as an actor, and there's just like a little bit of a lens into what's it like for you to be the character in the thing that you wrote when you acted?
Yeah, I think because I was trained as an actor first, because I have a master's degree in acting, and then 15 years later, I got a master's degree in creative writing.
Where were those
Um,
from? I'm sorry to interrupt.
oh, sure. I went to Brown University Trinity Repertory for acting,
Yes.
and then I went to Lesley University, and I just graduated in 2023.
I'm sorry, I just had the budge right in there. I'm from Rhode Island originally,
Oh,
Pawtucket,
yeah.
and so Trinity Rep for me, and I love this come from my parents. It's like they weren't into art and stuff. Trinity Rep and all these great actors, and they created this great, being proud of it in Rhode Island,
Yeah.
Trinity Rep and having this great art. So the reason why I asked that, I'm trying to remember. I thought the Howard Trinity Rep,
Yeah.
but sorry to interrupt you. We were talking about you in the acting in your work.
Yeah. So I think there is something to, and I've talked to a couple other playwrights who also act in their work, that there is something to when you're trained as an actor, that's how you enter a play. And so much of the writing is you want the dialogue, I always want it to zip and pop. My stuff is usually witty. Even in high tension situations, even if there's blood and violence, I'm like, no, there's a joke too. Don't worry. Because humor comes out of those situations.
You're nervous.
So many, exactly. So many. It's a different kind of laugh, but there should be a laugh. So there is something to doing it with them, because sometimes you can feel instead of listening. So listen, I can analyze it too much, versus if I'm in the trenches with them, if I'm in the ring, if I'm going through the story right along with them, I can usually, specifically cuts, I can usually go, oh, this scene is too long. Because the pace, I'm with them, and I'm like, yep, the pace. This is where we want to be.
Feel it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a heart thing instead of a head thing, and I think the best writers can balance both. So sometimes when I'm acting in a work, sometimes we'll read the whole thing, and I won't play my part. I'll kind of ask someone to come in so I can hear it, and then I can analyze it, and then I can do my heart work when I'm playing the part.
Can I ask you a question? I heard a couple points you mentioned. Seems like dialogue is super important to you, and to be I want to explain something. In writing, I'm always tilted towards the dialogue, always, and I feel sometimes what I try to tell myself to do for the rest of the world is to tell myself, Ken, have them describe what color is around or what something looks like or anything like that. And so dialogue, I love connected to them, but sometimes in creating is what does people look like? Where are they? What's the atmosphere? And but I love the way you described it as far as words, Chris. Me, I'm English lit philosophy guy. The words, I become so pulled in by those. But do you look at dialogue for kind of the cadence and the meter, and is that your guiding principle?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually Truth About Transylvania is the first show I've kind of done in more heightened language. I my earlier work is pretty contemporary. I always like to think I was highly inspired by Gilmore Girls, because that was my favorite TV show, and that sparkle in the dialogue, and how many contemporary references can you throw in and things like that. But then with Gothic works, because as we were talking about, it is heightened. The stakes are always high, literally and figuratively. That heightened language just suits it. So it's not, so this play isn't verse, but it's not contemporary. It's somewhere in between. So there is a cadence and a rhythm, and actually our actor who's playing John was talking about it the other day, and he was like, this feels like Shakespeare sometimes, which I was like, well, that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to
You're
me.
like,
Thank
yes, thank you.
Yes.
I hit my mark.
Yeah, because he was like, because Shakespeare has that very specific iambic pentameter,
Okay.
and when you're memorizing Shakespeare, you know immediately when it's wrong because it's just like,
You can
no,
feel
the
it a
rhythm
little
is
bit.
off. Yeah, it's a heart thing, and so I think this play is like there's a heart rhythm to it. So it's not as precise as iambic pentameter or anything like that. There's no rhyming couplets or things like that you may prescribe to traditional verse, but there is like a heightened quality and a heart rhythm that drives the piece. Because that's what's driving this man, is that he wants to tell his story. He wants to prove the truth, which is such a personal thing. So for me, like, contemporary language just wasn't enough.
Yeah. Oh, it's so fun talking about that. I didn't plan on it, but I've just been happening to bump into Gothic artists and writers and such and novelists, and it's this time of the year, but I didn't even know if early go for it. So it's nice to bump into.
Mm-hmm.
I just love all this. Can you tell? We're recording here in mid October, 2025. Can you tell us a bit about the truth about Transylvania, the performance, where the performance is going to be, and just like, this being out there and having life?
Sure. Yeah. So performances are going to be at the Art New York Theater Spaces, which is for those in Manhattan, 53rd Street and 10th Ave. In the Mezzanine Theater, they have two theaters, so it's in the larger space. Performances start October 24th. We're only running for 1 week, the Halloween week, of course.
Yeah.
So our last show is November 1st. So there are only 7 chances to catch it. And there's information on our website, which is www.transylvaniatheplay.com.
Cool. That's awesome. I wanted to ask the big question just to get out of the way,
Mm-hmm.
like, because I think Patricia might have the answer. Why is there something rather than nothing?
Say that again. I'm sorry, you broke up.
Why is there something rather than nothing?
Why is there something rather than nothing? Well, I think it's what we've been talking about. I think it's passion. I think it's, as long as there's people, I think there's human. I think even though sometimes in this world it can feel like there's nothing and it's hopeless, there's always something, because there's always passion and there's always art. And maybe that's a little naive of me, but that's what's fueled me from day one.
There's semi-naive components in my own head that I don't get rid of. So,
because they feel you. They may be quote unquote naive, but they
it's
get you
fine.
through.
I'm
Yeah.
going to keep that space in my head for survivability. um, I wanted to ask you, additionally, since you've done so much work in plays and etc., can you talk about some of the other adaptations that you've done? Because there's some back behind this about your reworking the Gothic, um, the feminine and feminist. Um, what other projects have you tried to dig into and
Yeah.
recreate?
Yeah. So I've been working on a Jekyll and Hyde adaptation for a while that will be done next year at Art New York. So I'm excited about that. I've done a turning of the, I almost called it Taming of the Shrew. No, Turn of the Screw.
Yes, I saw that as well. I love
and that's
that.
that's a one-act play that
Really?
I wrote. Yeah, that because I think Turn of the Screw is just, and that's not an adaptation as much as it's inspired by, because it actually takes place after the events of the novel, because
No way.
the novella, I should say, because I've always been like, spoiler alert again, everyone. It ends with the boy dying, and I'm always just like,
even in the last sentence, like he expires.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I literally thought, well, she's screwed. And I was like, oh, Screwed. That's the name of the play. Because it's about how no one believes her side of the story. That
Flora.
Of what? Yeah. Okay. Flora believes her. Yeah. And so
the governess.
So that's the governess. Yeah, because the governess doesn't get a name. James doesn't give her a name. And Dracula is probably the book that started me on this whole Gothic adventure. So I've always said I would write a new Dracula every 5 years.
Awesome.
So, and highlight a different character, because there's so many great characters in there. So I'm already tinkering with the next one, and I do original stuff as well, as you mentioned with my bio. So it's things that are inspired by Gothic, but not necessarily an adaptation. So last year we did a show called The Maid and the Mesmerizer, which is a two-hander about a romance between a stage hypnotist and the charming assistant who wears a maid costume. So she's the maid, he's the mesmerizer, and it's inspired by like Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, those kinds of Gothic romance novels specifically. And so it's just a two-hander love story that goes wrong. Spoiler alert again. I'm just dropping them all over the place.
Something's gonna go horribly wrong.
If you know Wuthering Heights, like that does not end well. So sometimes it's taking the concepts or the tropes and themes from that work and applying it to an original storyline. Is something fun to do as well.
And another indulgence here. Turn of the Screw for me is one of the greatest works of art, ghost story, etc. I think Henry James is, just as far as a writer, is just a brilliant craftsman. Turn of the Screw has so much to it, and I want to tell you about one experience that blew my mind. I tell everybody about this. When I was, so there was, what's the name of the Truman Capote screenplay, the movie they made of it, I think was called The Heiress, that they made of Turn of the Screw. Truman Capote writes the screenplay for it, and I'm like, in my head, when I first found out, I'm like, Truman Capote, I adore Truman Capote, and I'm like, Capote's doing the screenplay for the Turn of the Screw. This is like a, just an historic, beautiful thing. As the carriage transporting the governess on an initial scene, moving through a boggy, swampy area overlaid with fog, moving through, bumping around. Governess is getting over to her new location. When I watched that, it was completely how I envisioned that scene looking. And I'm not into like accordance, like the whole movie versus book thing it's just so ill calibrated. I love talking about it, but it's ill calibrated. But my mouth dropped because I'm like, I adore Truman Capote. I adore Henry James. Now somebody's doing this visually, and I am watching what was in my mind, just on the approach. It wasn't like the characters looked like in my head or anything like that.
Right.
Just the entry, the grounds, it all comported exactly in my head. And I was like, I've never had that experience. It was so cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, and it sounds so like the word we've been talking about so much is Gothic, which I think is, for me, Gothic is the juxtaposition of beauty and horror, or beauty and scary. So you have the carriage,
Decay.
you have the mist. Yeah, you have decay happening, but it's beautiful somehow.
Yeah.
And that juxtaposition and that duality that we love in the best of stories, whether it's life and death. And so for me, it's obviously life and death is a huge part of Gothic literature, but for me, it's beauty mixed with death, decay,
I like that
horror.
Yeah.
Because then, and which is why I think vampires are so iconic to Gothic work, is that you're terrified of them, but they still entrance you, versus other monsters, not as much, but there is that allure of a vampire that, even though it's not going to end well.
Yeah. It drops into the frailty of like human desire and not knowing, like, ambiguity around wanting to be consumed or like not choosing your consumption. And like, there's so much there. Well, thank you for operating in this area, Patricia. And, really love talking about the Gothic and this play. I was saying, I was reading about the work that you've done and how you think about it, and I just get excited about the writing. And best of luck on this. You're taking this all the way. This Truth About Transylvania all the way through All Saints Day, November 1st. I think. Yeah.
Yes.
That's absolutely fantastic. Since we have the privilege of we're talking with you about you can be going back into rehearsal. Can you just take us in? What are you going to be doing when you go back into rehearsal? What that's like, just to give us the kinetic energy?
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
You don't know.
No, well, I do. Well, because they're screaming in the background sometimes, and I'm like, "Oh, you're on that scene."
No, we have the ambience for the show, so I just let it.
Yeah, and we're going to be doing actually our first full run through. After I'll be going back in, and we'll be able to do. It's a 90-minute no intermission show, which are my favorite. So we'll be able to just do the full ride, and which is an exciting. My favorite part as an actor actually is the first run through, because that's when you learn the most of, okay, here's the part of the story I get and I'm excited, and here's the part I need to like look at my script and think about. So we'll be doing that journey today.
Awesome. We audience, we have to let Patricia Lynn get into her play. Thank you so much, Patricia.
Thank you.
Real thrill to hear you. I'm glad to hear Trinity Rep training, and really appreciate your enthusiasm. Like, part of doing the show, or what gets me excited about art is the passion, is the losing your mind, is losing time and excitement. So otherwise, I don't know what the heck we're doing. So
right, exactly.
Break a leg. Great to talk to you, Patricia.
All right, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for this.
Absolutely.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.
listeners to stay connected with us and our guests, visit somethingratherthannothing.com. Join our mailing list for exclusive updates and access to guest-created art. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast platform. People really read that shit. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our community across the planet. This is a global show, and we like to give a shout out to our many listeners across the world, including many listeners in Canada, Spain, Germany, UK, Argentina, Brazil, India, Thailand, and so many more places. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast for behind-the-scenes content. And the best way to help the show is to tell your friends about us. If you love it, they'll love it too. Tell your friends who love it. We love you. This is Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast.